Hey, what's going on, everybody? All right. Welcome into another edition here of Green with Envy. Not the normal intro. You're going to hear my guy Greg here in just a minute if you're watching us on YouTube here on a Sunday afternoon. What up? What up? What up? It is good to be here. We are recording this right now, Sunday afternoon, in advance of the Celtics Knicks game. So if you're watching us on YouTube right now, you'll hear all at the beginning. If you're listening on the podcast, you might not hear some of this. Greg's gonna do some of the magic of editing. It's one of I was thinking about this before we got hopped on here, Greg. One of the things I kind of love about podcasts is a little bit like time traveling. We can kind of warp our own reality into what we need it to be to kind of fit our schedules. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. So we're recording this in advance of Celtics Knicks. We're gonna hit a few other topics here that you'll hear throughout the podcast. But Greg, right now we're going into the Celtics Knicks game and coming off what. Well, let's start here. Was the game against the Brooklyn Nets on Friday night? Was that the worst loss of the season? Because that's what we're going into the Sunday night game with. That's the energy that we need to address before we even get to talking about Celtics Knicks.
It was a bad loss. Do you have a list of like the candidates of losses that we could?
I didn't go that deep because really to me it jumped out as there's two games that really stand out to me. It's that game. And it's just the complete meltdown that was the 151 points in regulation to Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
That was just embarrassing though. That was, I don't know. That one I just kind of throw to the side. This game, I mean, this is the blowing of a 28-point lead, and you find a way to still lose by double digits. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of the mic'd up sessions that they had with Joe Mazzulla, he talked a lot about switch your mindset. Like it's no longer a 28-point game. You guys kind of farted around and acted like we're at the Y right now. And you could see, and I even tweeted this out at one point when the 28-point lead was starting to dwindle down closer to single digits. And this has been kind of, I mean, I don't want to, once again, the Celtics are 45-19 a half game out of first place. Don't ever want to overreact to one game, but it is frustrating when you see this team. And it felt like early on in that game, it felt like the ball was moving. It felt like, oh, this is, the Nets. Like I thought there was going to be a smackdown all the way through. Mm-hmm. And just the way that they came out with some pretty good energy. I thought they were getting good shots. They were moving the ball. And then they just, for whatever reason, hit a point where it got so casual. It got so flippant. It felt like it was the last run and we've already put our work in. This is just us kind of messing around here. And you see the Celtics do this like on a mildly consistent basis at times when they get big leads. And so it becomes frustrating when you have a team like the Nets who are just a bunch of solid role players, and Mikal Bridges might be more than that because he had a really, really good game and he's had a couple really nice games now getting to shine a little bit more. But when you have a bunch of guys that are just not going to quit, it's going to come bite you in the ass at certain times. And so it was frustrating to watch. So I think it's between that and the Oklahoma City game. And I would probably lean Brooklyn just because you blew the lead, not just you didn't show up. You came out, blew a lead, and you're fighting for that 1 seed with the Bucks right now.
Yeah, I think, lineups played a big role in that comeback. Mazzulla went back to the starting five at the end of the first half when the lead initially dwindled down to 9 points. And when he went back to the starting lineup, the Nets were no longer with their like traditional lineup with Claxton at the 5. That's when they went with their 5 wings. And we started to get really stagnant on offense because of that. They were just switching everything, and we didn't really have the lineup out there to take advantage of that. And then on the other end of the court, they were kind of going at Rob and going at Al whenever they wanted, and we even saw that at the end of the game. That was continued to be the situation. Marcus Smart was in foul trouble for a little bit. And then, we ended up
real quick on that. Have you ever seen someone get called for go into the second half with 0 fouls and get 4 fouls in under 4 minutes? I literally don't think I've ever seen that in any space.
It literally happened
rec league, high school, wherever.
It literally happened to Jaylen McDaniels for the Sixers like 2 games ago. So that's the only other time
I didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah. But what I was saying is at the end of the game, right, we still have Al Horford on the court and Rob's off the court because Rob got hurt. But Derek White's on the bench. It's Al Horford and Grant Williams, the 2 bigs in the game. And I felt like we needed to make that switch. Like something else needed to happen because they were continuing to target Al. He hit the big 3 to get the game to 9 and then missed that layup that would have got it to 7. But that's what their offense was. It was find the mismatch, hunt it, and just relentlessly go at that. So the fact that Joe didn't see that that's what was happening and that we needed to make an adjustment so that we could just guard 1 through 5 because they weren't big out there. Maybe they had some tougher rebounders than we did, but like we still would have had Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum on the court, Grant Williams on the court to get rebounds. Like there was a lineup out there that could have cracked the code against the Nets to kind of stem that tide a little bit. But it was, to answer your question, it was probably the worst loss of the season, but that was also a little bit of a trap game because we have this Celtics Knicks game here this afternoon.
Yeah, and I think, now that there's no KD, no Kyrie, this is kind of a little bit of that Doc Rivers rule we talked about. When you don't have your best players, you kind of let your guard down a little bit. This is a difference. It's not just an injury sense, but it's a whole new team from the Brooklyn team that the Celtics before that had won 10 straight games against, including the playoffs. So that was, the first loss since basically Kyrie stomped on Lucky, a couple years ago at this point. But yeah, looking ahead to this Knicks game, that could have been exactly what was happening. And the Knicks are streaking, man. I mean, obviously we saw them earlier in the week. They beat the Celtics pretty handily in Madison Square Garden last Monday night. They're winners of 8 in a row, with the Bucks going down to the Sixers last night. They are now the longest winning streak in the NBA, 9-1 in their last 10 overall. They had that epic game the other night against the Miami Heat. Julius Randle with the step back to his right, the double bang from Mike Breen. I mean, this Knicks team, this is a game right now where I think it's the regular season still, and the Celtics are still going to be, win or lose, they're still going to be in a very similar position either way. But this does feel a little bit like a gut check game. Like, what the Knicks are bringing. The energy the Knicks are coming with. They beat you in your home court. We were there. We were there for the Jaylen Brown missed free throws in that game. And I think you had a really great comment. I don't know if it was while we were at the game or maybe it was a subsequent podcast that we did. But you said if you just took away the context of that and just walked into that arena, and this would apply for last Monday night as well, and just said, don't worry about the records. Don't worry about who has an MVP candidate, who's whatever. Just watch this game in a vacuum and tell me, who do you think the better team is? The last 2 times these teams have met, the answer to both of those would be the Knicks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that was in a group text. I think I texted that to Liptak. But yeah, the Knicks are looking great, man. I don't know if you were able to watch that, actual full possession of Julius Randle's shot, but there were like 3 different times where the Heat almost forced a turnover and Randle had to scramble to go get the ball and then somehow still hit that 3-pointer. And the Knicks are starting to get that momentum and starting to feel a little bit like, in baseball, when you have that wild card team that gets hot and ends up making their run to the finals. I'm not saying that the Knicks are going to do that this year, but they're starting to feel more and more like a real team and not just a flash in the pan, so to speak. This is not just Linsanity happening at a team-wide level, right? This is actually good basketball with a team and a roster that makes a lot of sense, and 2 guys that are just hard to guard and are bad matchups for the Celtics. So specifically looking at this matchup today, like historically, Julius Randle just cooks everybody on the Celtics. I thought maybe Grant Williams would be that stopper. He can't guard him. Al Horford, you would expect him to be able to guard him a little bit. He can't guard him. So like, who else are you going to throw out there? We tried Blake Griffin the last time we played them, I believe, and like Blake Griffin couldn't guard him. So like, what are you supposed to do at that point with a guy like Julius Randle who's playing at this level? Jalen Brunson, he cooked us the first time we played them. The second time he was still able to do his thing, but that was probably his lowest scoring game and since like the turn of the calendar this year, because Marcus Smart was back. And I thought Marcus Smart did a really good job just containing him and his scoring output. So this game this afternoon, I think, is really important for the Celtics. And it's actually funny because we just played a very similar game, gut check game, against the Cavs, because the Cavs had beaten us twice earlier in the season. We needed to get that to prove that we could beat them. And I think we need to do that today against the Knicks.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun matchup. I think the other matchup that I'm really looking at that you didn't touch on was, and when we talked about this in our last episode, was Mitchell Robinson versus Rob Williams. It's kind of a matchup. It's not a great matchup for Rob, but as you look at
out today.
Oh, is he out today?
Yeah, because he hurt his hamstring. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Well, another thing that obviously, yeah, that's right. Him and Malcolm, I think, are both going to be. I think Brogdon's maybe questionable with ankle soreness, so I guess we won't see that. But it's how do we respond? Because once again, as we talked about, and you laid out, like, we really haven't had. It feels like we've had longer sustained stretches with Rob Williams than we actually really have, and we haven't. And so this is another. Hey, here's Joe Mazzulla. Here's a simulated experience of a potential playoff matchup. Rob's out. He goes out in game 3. This could be a round 2 matchup right now. If the Celtics end up back in the 1 seed, looks like the Knicks are going to be fighting with the Cavs, potentially on a game and a half back, that 4-5 matchup. So if this is your second round matchup and you're coming into game 3, game 4, whatever it is, Rob's tweaked. All right, Mitchell Robinson has been really good since he came back from injury. He really makes a big difference with their defense, with, basically a lot of the things that Rob does for our team when he's at his best is a lot of the things that Mitchell Robinson does for the Knicks. So what's that response? How are you going to handle that along with everything else that you just said and the way that this team is playing at their peak? And so this is a potential playoff matchup where I do think the Celtics need to kind of treat this as that simulated experience, as, hey, whoever we have available, let's play this like we're playing a playoff game to kind of get that feel. So I think that's going to be a really fun matchup. Greg, if you're listening to this right now on YouTube, Greg is going to have a recap for that here in the podcast. If you're listening to me say this on the podcast, you probably already heard it. Greg put it at the front. He's a wizard. He's going to manipulate time so that everything makes sense in chronological order here on our podcast. But for right now, we want to transition to another topic that's happening in the NBA. And while, everything that when it comes to Celtics Twitter, things can get pretty doom and gloom, especially for a game like the Nets. And I'll be honest, I kind of stayed away from Celtics Twitter after that game. I just kind of put it in my back pocket. We've been there. We've seen what happens when, events like this happen that we get really upset about. And then you look around the NBA and you look specifically to what's happening in Memphis with a guy like Ja Morant. And in general, really bad day for the Memphis Grizzlies. I was golfing yesterday, Greg, and at the turn at one point, I got a couple text messages of people talking about the Ja Morant news. And I pulled out my phone, and there's about 7 to 8 notifications from Shams and Woj. All of them are just bad Grizzlies news. Mm-hmm. Dylan Brooks suspended 1 game for 16 texts. Brandon Clark out for the season. And then, of course, multiple Ja Morant texts involving basically the follow-up of what's already been a bad week with, as we talked about during our All-NBA MVP discussions, and how that honestly affected a little bit of our mindset going into how do we feel about where Ja Morant's going to be. He has the altercation with a 17-year-old guy in his hometown over the summer. Fists are thrown, guns are brought out, a lot of he said type stuff. And, and so that's kind of the start of the week. And now you get to the end of the week where Ja Morant's at a nightclub on his Instagram Live, posing with a gun, may have been a toy gun. I think I've read in a few places, not sure what to make of that.
Toy gun.
I'm saying it didn't look like it to me, but I've seen that out there. Like I said, I don't know, but did not look like one by any means.
Who carries around a toy gun? Like why
at a nightclub? I don't know,
man. Toy gun?
I have no idea. Like I said, I just seen it out there, just saying what I've seen.
Okay.
But, so then with that, he's now going to be stepping away from the team, at least I don't know if it's technically a suspension or it's just removing himself kind of, from the team for a little bit to get right. And it made Greg and I both think a little bit. Ja Morant's 23 years old. We just celebrated Jayson Tatum's. I like I said because we just love Jayson Tatum so much. So it's like we felt like part of the celebration, even though it didn't go great. Obviously, as we just talked about that Nets game earlier. But Jayson Tatum just turned 25, and it's crazy because he's, the running joke, of course, is that Jayson Tatum's 19, and it feels like he's been in the league for almost a decade. I mean, it is 6-7 years at this point. Like it's been a long time, but it made us start to think of just Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum and how young these guys are, but how appreciative we are actually that the only issues we've ever had to talk about with Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum is on court. There has never been a moment that we've really had to dive ourselves into, these off-court type issues. And I hope Ja Morant, gets it figured out. I mean, I love watching him play. I hope, everything gets figured out. But it really shines a light that as Celtics fans, how kind of blessed we are that these are the guys that we've been building this team around, and almost the maturity that they've had at the young ages of 25 and 26, respectively.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw on Jayson Titties.
Maybe on his 25th birthday he turned into Jayson Titties. I don't know, but
no, well he didn't. So he posted a video that Brett Hampton shot, and it was just shout out to Brett. It was just on his Instagram, and it just made me think about just right now as you were talking, the way that Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum have cultivated like their public persona and cultivated an image, but it also doesn't feel fake. It doesn't feel like they're trying to like make them appear to be some type of way. But I was thinking as we were talking about Ja, just like maybe Ja needs like a Brett Hampton in his life. You know what I mean? Somebody to kind of like document like every step of the way, this journey that he's on. Because like when you start reviewing that footage, maybe you start thinking like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing all these things that I've been doing and just like living the, I guess, the celebrity lifestyle
Yeah.
that
I
John
mean,
Morant
it's
has
like
been
what
living.
it's like watching film on the court, right? Like, oh,
Mhm.
maybe I shouldn't be going under those screens against Steph Curry, or you start to reevaluate whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I want to save my thoughts on Jaylen and Jayson just for a little bit here because I think I want to have a little bit of a wider just understanding of what's going on with Ja right now, right? So like I was thinking about it, and like normally when someone starts acting out and flexing like Ja has been flexing, they're kind of compensating for something going on in their life, whether that's stress, anxiety, or some other like subconscious back of the mind inadequacy that they've got going on. And Josh sort of alluded to that in the statement that he put out that he's been like dealing with a bunch of stuff. We don't know what that stuff is. Who knows? Maybe that was just trying to save face. But I believe that because I know from my own personal experience and just being a human being, a lot of times when you are dealing with stuff, you tend to try to overcompensate for things, right? So quick shout to Ja, hoping he gets the help that he needs before he ends up being like a tragic tale and an example of what not to do. Hopefully this is the nadir of the Ja Morant, fiasco that's been going on. I also thought it was interesting reading Paul Pierce's comments on Ja. Have you had a chance to see what Paul said?
I have not seen that. Can you give me a summary or to just talk about it a little bit?
Basically he was defending Ja and, talking about his own experiences, having been stabbed multiple times like he was early in his career and how that he always carried a gun on him because basically as a black megastar, he's a
Mhm.
target, right? And he was
Yeah.
saying like you don't understand like Ja is he's a target just because of who he is, right? So I was thinking about that. And first, what are your thoughts on Paul Pierce coming out and sort of defending John Morant?
I mean, so one of the things that, and especially in these situations, I always try to think about is, we say this a lot in the show, context matters, right? So
Mhm.
you have to understand the mindset of where they're coming from. And to be honest, like Paul Pierce can get into that mindset. I can't. I can,
Yeah.
I'm from a distance. I'm not in that position. I never will be. I'll never be, in the position John Morant is with all of those other factors coming into it. He's, 23 years old. Like that is a lot to weigh on. And so, I think Jalen Rose, I heard Jalen Rose's comments, which were, echoed, something very similar to that, where, it just talks about, growing up and becoming, he said something during it was right before the Bucks Sixers game, where he talked about, whatever Ja's role in his crew was with his group of friends. There's always kind of a hierarchy, right? Like
Mhm.
this person might be the leader, this is the planner, this person, you all have different roles, even within your own friend group, your own network. Once John Morant signed that deal and got drafted by the Grizzlies, he becomes the leader. Whether or not that was his role within that group, he's the face of his group, his social network, his family. He's that representation,
Mhm.
and that's not always an easy adjustment. And so, to that, it kind of speaks a little bit to Paul Pierce's point that it's a very different lifestyle and how you adjust, how you react, what your circle is. Like it takes a while to kind of maybe figure out what that might be. So as much as I'll never be in that, I think Paul Pierce's comments don't super surprise me. Obviously, knowing the background that we have from Paul Pierce's situation, in which I know I had a youth football coach that was involved in that entire situation. So,
Mhm.
knowing that situation like we do, I'm not surprised by the comments, and I think it makes a little bit of sense. And everybody's scenario is so different, which is why with a guy like John Morant, from at least what I've seen from a distance, I don't want to rush to go judge this guy and say he's a clown. Look at how dumb he is. It's like I don't know, man. I don't know his setup, and I'm like to your point that you mentioned. I'm glad he's going to get that help, but I think Paul Pierce's comments actually make a lot of sense, and I think he is a very appropriate person to be speaking on the matter.
Are you familiar with the Young Dolph murder that happened in Memphis? Who Young Dolph is?
I know he was a rapper that was murdered. I don't know the details of it.
Okay. So I'll talk about that here in a second. But as I was thinking about the Paul Pierce comments, it made me think that maybe Ja, is kind of dealing with some shit in Memphis where he felt like he needed to associate with people who might be able to provide him with some protection, maybe even demonstrate he wasn't an easy target. I saw some people like kind of floating that out there that like maybe Ja's dealing with some stuff and he has added people to his friend group that might be able to provide him with a little bit more protection. I don't know if the people that are with him all the time are people he grew up with, or how many people have just entered his life recently. I don't have that information, but
Yeah.
that's just something to consider. And to me, the feeling about needing to kind of flex on the internet and seemingly put it out there that you're not somebody to F with, letting people know that you're strapped, which is legal. Obviously, John Morant has that right to carry a weapon, but I think he was in Denver where it happened. So like he wasn't allowed to have his gun with him. And then you got to consider all of the stuff with his Nike deal and all that. But John, by showing the gun, the real gun, on Instagram Live, he's kind of making himself a target, right? If he feels like he's a target in the city where one of their crown jewels, Young Dolph, was murdered in broad daylight, and you would have thought that the fact that Young Dolph is this like super famous rapper from Memphis, that would have made him untouchable in the city of Memphis. I think Ja's kind of like putting himself in extreme danger with like showing that, like, hey, if you're gonna come around me, just know that like I got that thing on me, and like so do my boys. You know what I mean? So like I don't really know like about that life. I'm not about that life, but I do know that in Memphis, like there's a lot of violence and gun violence in that city. And I don't know if Ja, like being the new face of the city, has made some people jealous. Like when you go back and you look at the Young Dolph story where he was there, people tried to take his life multiple times, and eventually he was literally murdered in broad daylight, like streets from where he grew up, at like a donut shop. You know what I mean? And like he had comments about how he just thought everyone that was trying to kill him, they were just jealous that he kind of made it out. You know what I mean? So like in Memphis where that type of stuff happens, who knows? Maybe Ja does feel like he needs to like have that protection and show people that like don't mess with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, to put a little bit of a bow on the John Morant of part of the situation, is just he needs to start surrounding himself with better decisions. Like, because some of this is with his crew, some of it's with him. Ultimately, despite being 23, like there does come a time where you just have to start putting yourselves in better scenarios to be successful. And what we've seen, over the last stretch with some of these decisions of who's Ja's with, who's his crew is, and where he is in the decisions he's making. It's just to me, it's just a level of immaturity, but we also don't know the circumstance. But you have to start to kind of build that protection. So I hope Ja does that. Hope Ja is continuing to make progress. But with that, before we go to our final segment here, Greg, like I said, I know you wanted to circle back and talk about how this made us then reflect on the team that we cover. And we've had Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum, and you can throw Marcus Smart in this because he's been here since he was a rookie. So I feel like we've had a lot of the core of this team. Those three would really be probably the central core when you look at this Boston Celtics team. And we've watched them kind of grow up, and it's been relatively incident free. And anything that we have, when Celtics fans get really upset about a 28-point lead that gets blown, that's on the court, man. Like that's on the court. Like yeah, I wish sometimes Jaylen Brown didn't have certain turnovers, or I wish sometimes Marcus Smart didn't take a three when he shouldn't, or whatever that might be. But when those are your issues, and and those three guys are having the success that they've had, it makes me feel really appreciative as a fan that, like, hey, this is the team that I love watching, the team that I, even before that, this is the team that, like, they're representing the team that I've loved my entire life to watch play basketball. And these are the guys that I continue to watch night in and night out. So it just makes me feel a little bit extra appreciative of the situation that we have with the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, I mean, Jaylen Brown, he's almost carrying on the legacy of like a Bill Russell, within the city. The fact that he's so conscious of the need to have, Black leadership in the city of Boston, and to have Black representation, small business, the fact that he started Juice and all that. Like, I think Jaylen, this is why I never wanted to trade Jaylen. I think he's super, super important to the city of Boston. Then you have Marcus Smart, who's very community oriented, is always giving back, has gone through his own struggles in his life that have allowed him the perspective to be like, this is the impact that I want to make. I want to be a good person, so on and so forth. And then you have Jayson Tatum, who like kind of represents like the family values side of things, right? Where he's just like great father to Deuce. Deuce is at everything. The video that Jayson just put out there for his 25th birthday, like obviously we're gonna have shots of Deuce in that. Deuce is right there
Yeah.
at the birthday party. Think about like the way John Morant is celebrating his life, at the strip club, flashing the gun and all that. Hey man, I've been to a strip club. I love a good strip club story, right? But like, but I think with Tatum, like that's not the way that he's choosing to go out and kind of just like represent himself and represent the team and all that. Like they all have this such a great understanding of like the legacy of the organization, what it means to have a good public image and also just to be good people that want to make the world a better place. Like really that's kind of what I feel about all three of those guys on the team, is that they're all like moving things forward for not only the team, not only the city, but like society as a whole. Like you really can get to that point with those guys without feeling corny about it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, like Jaylen Brown like really cares about making the world a better place. Well, his actions prove that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for the city of Boston and for Celtics fans to embrace that and be like, you know what, these are the guys. Like, yeah, winning a championship matters, but like we want guys that represent our organization and represent themselves in a way that like upholds the respect that they have for themselves.
Yeah, and they seem authentic, and I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest part of it, is that it feels very, very authentic, and I think that's what leads us to appreciate them. And I hope that for those that are listening, it doesn't mean you can't get frustrated with stuff that happens on the court, but that these are the guys that the Celtics have built this team around, have built a team that is poised to not just be I mean, they haven't been a flash. They've been in multiple conference finals over the last couple of years, went to the finals last year. And, this team does not feel like there's any reason to slow down over the next couple of years with this core. Just don't take them for granted. That's basically all I got on that. With that said, Greg, let's Cupid vibe check. All right, you want to take this one first, Greg? I feel like you got something. You got something. If you don't, I'm happy to take it. But I feel like you got something in the chamber.
First of all, I gotta say shout out to you for like not jumping in when I mentioned I love a good strip club story.
I was gonna say maybe we'll make a YouTube only cut of some good strip club stories, but I figured I'd keep that reserved for now.
Yeah, good call. All right, my vibe check of the week. I am vibing with home improvement projects. The two of us became homeowners recently yesterday, and not only home improvement projects, but like spontaneous home improvement projects where you don't necessarily have all the tools that you need to get the job done, but you still figure out a way to do it. So yesterday, Danielle and I are sitting outside in our backyard. We had just mowed our lawn. Well, I had mowed the lawn. Danielle didn't mow the lawn. And we're sitting out there, and we were kind of just hanging outside. Danielle had made like a little charcuterie boards. We're having like a little picnic in the backyard. And we're looking around. It's like such a beautiful day. We're talking about, do we want to try and like hang out with people? What are our social batteries like at that day? And we realized that we had a lot of energy, but like we didn't necessarily like want to go kick it with the crew. So we were like, all right, what are we going to do? And we started like just talking about different ways that we can improve the house and things that just like need to be taken care of. And we looked around and we were like, hey, we've got all of these like cinder blocks sitting around in different points of the yard from the previous owner. They had like kind of designed the backyard in a certain way with plants and flowers and all that. And we were like, we don't like plants. Like we don't like garden or anything like that. So how can we make this backyard a little bit more our own with the things that are already in here? So what we did is we took all of these like cinder blocks and we decided to like build a patio, like an extension of our back patio, to move our grill. So basically it ended up being just like a place for the grill, which makes our patio itself a lot more functional.
Yeah.
So we did that.
The space.
Reutilize the space. And we ended up doing that in about 3 hours. I had to carry these probably, I don't know, 30 pound cinder blocks around the yard. So I got my workout in. Yeah,
like
we're raking up the soil. There's like, I don't know what it's called, but some sort of like cloth like material that people put into the bottom of like flower beds and stuff like that to make sure that like grubs don't get it. So we had to like pull up all that stuff. We're raking it. We're re-leveling the soil. And at the end of the day, it came out looking great. I'm really happy we did it. And I just love the idea that we didn't have to plan this. It's just something we spontaneously did, and it came out great.
Yeah, happened organically. Love that. Are you gonna post a picture of that for everybody to see on Instagram?
I mean, I could. So
I mean, I'm
we were
just saying,
we were
I
a
mean,
little.
you talk about how beautiful it is, so now I want the people to see it.
You know what I really wish we had done was taken a before and after. So I don't know if you follow Aaron Blackerby from our basketball team on
I do. Yeah,
Instagram.
he's doing a run. Him and his wife are doing, or soon to be wife, I believe. Him and his fiance. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
I believe they're doing a renovation project. I've seen him post like before and after in the
Yeah.
kitchen with some tiling, whatever else
Yeah,
he
and
might
he'll
do.
do the thing like click to see our kitchen transform, like that. I wish
Mhm.
we'd done something like that. So like because it was spontaneous and we didn't necessarily have a plan going into it, I don't know that the before and after would have made sense because I didn't know what the after was going to
Yeah.
look like. I didn't have a vision for it until it started happening organically. But it was a lot of fun, man. And Danielle and I at the end, we were just like, well, we're in our backyard. It's beautiful out. Like, let's keep this backyard energy rolling. So what we did is we brought our little Super Nintendo out there and we decided to play some Donkey Kong and Super Mario World on our projector outside. So it ended up being a great day.
I like that Danielle's turning you into like a gamer nerd in different ways. I think this is a great development for 34-year-old Greg, especially because and you've mentioned this before. You were always, and not that like, so for you were always a little bit left out of the video game circle
Yeah.
for the most part. I think there was a stretch when we were younger that like when we were really young where you would literally walk down to my house and wake me up to play video games.
Yeah.
So that was a different era. But then there was like later, like more like high school ish, probably a little bit college, where like sometimes we would just be sitting around like just hanging out playing video games, and it was just like, oh yeah, we'll call Greg when we do something else.
Yeah.
It was almost like an afterthought. But now being with Danielle, who is a gamer, seeing you wanting to like now go get like NBA 2K and stuff. It's a different side of you that I like seeing this development in you that's coming along here.
Well, as
Age
a kid,
34.
yeah, as a kid, like, my brother and I, we would always play Street Fighter 2. So I had Super Nintendo. That was the system that I
Yeah.
had growing up, with Super Nintendo.
Well, because you had that before a lot of people had, like once people started going over to like PlayStation and N64, you guys didn't keep really going with that. But I think you guys had a PlayStation, but like having that Super Nintendo was like, I remember that was like a big deal when we were, whatever, we
Oh,
were
yeah.
7 years old playing Ken Griffey Jr. baseball on
Yeah.
that with all the made up
Madden.
names except for Ken Griffey. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we played Joe and Mac, Street Fighter. I'm trying to think if there are any other games that we played all the time. But yeah, I was a Super Nintendo kid. My next door neighbor was a Sega kid, and my cousin Steve, not Steve Moy, but Steve Keedy on my dad's side, was a Sega kid. So I play a lot of Sonic, play a lot of Mortal Kombat and stuff like that. You had a Nintendo 64. So what I would do, because I was stuck with the Super Nintendo. Will got the new system. He had the N64. So fourth grade, fifth grade, I would always walk down to Will's house like super early in the morning before Will was even awake. And Will's grandma was there, and she would answer the door. She'd wake William up. She'd like call for William to come out of the bedroom. Will would come out wrapped in his comforter, just like butt ass naked, wrapped in his comforter, and he'd just be like, "Oh, what's up, bro?" Like he'd like kind of shuffle his feet back to his bedroom. We'd sit there and we'd literally play like Cruising USA or like some version of Ken Griffey Jr. baseball
Yeah.
before school every single morning. So that's kind of like
I
the
don't even
history
think
of
we
Will and
talked. I think because I was just so like, what up, whatever. We just
Yeah.
literally would have the sticks, and then we would just be playing, cruising USA through the redwood forest or some
Yeah,
crap.
yeah.
Like,
No, I remember that, bro.
oh my god! All right, good times, good times, good times. That's a good trip down memory lane. I like how we got there after all that. That was good. All right, let me do my vibe check, and then we'll get everybody out of here, and then we can all. I know you got some brunch plans as we're recording this, and then you'll have everything recap for the front end of this podcast. This is a tough one for me, Greg.
Okay.
My vibe check's a little bit of a catch-22. Last night, you talked about how yesterday was beautiful out here in Austin, Texas, where we record. We played hoop in the morning, which was great. Loved getting like yesterday was very active for me. It was, went and played some hoop. Went right after that, came back, golfed, and then was just like, man, I don't want to go in. Like, it's just like I was enjoying just being outside. And so a few friends I was with playing golf, we're going to a show at a venue out here called Stubbs. I was like, I don't even know who it is, but it's an outdoor venue. It's just a nice night. I just wanted to be like out and be around the energy. And so I was like, all right, let's go. I'll go to the show, and took it like it wasn't nothing crazy of a night, just kind of like hung out. And then end of the night, probably like around midnight or so, was heading out, and I was gonna get some shawarma point.
Oh, love me some shawarma point.
First of all, it was closed. I don't know what was going on. I was very, very upset. So I settled for the other shawarma truck that was across the street. Still good. Not quite shawarma point, but here's my catch 22. Late night food, man. When you hit that shawarma late at night, woo, just injected into the veins, man. There was a point where I probably should have stopped, but it was just so good. You got a couple drinks in you, and you're just like, man, this shawarma is just hitting perfectly. Chef's kiss. Pay for it the next morning though. It's been a little slow moving today. The shawarma's got me doing a little two-step, little bathroom shuffle back and forth.
So here's my question: did you go brown people spicy? I know it wasn't shawarma point, then maybe they don't have the same like level of spice.
They didn't have the same, and that was part of the issue. Like it was really tasty. It wasn't super spicy, which is now that, like I said, it's a catch 22. So the fact that it wasn't super spicy, it's probably a little bit helpful, the day after, if you know what I'm saying. Sorry if it's a little bit much for y'all, but this is what we do here. We're much like we just talked about the Jays. We try to be authentic. This would probably be a conversation if Greg and I were in person, we'd have.
Here's the thing with shawarma point. When you go brown people spicy, it's like, all right, these are the moments where I really, really wish I had a bidet. Where it's just like, oh boy, like I should not go brown people spicy next time I go to shawarma point. But to your point, man, in the moment, shawarma late night, that's got to be one of the best late night foods. Like Chinese food, sometimes hit or miss. If you're in Dorchester, China Sky, bacon raviolis, like all day, like sign me up for those. But I would say, moving to Texas and living in Austin, of all the different late night foods that I could get, I think chicken shawarma wrap is probably top 2 late night foods. I don't know what the other one would be.
There's no doubt. It's elite. I don't know. I didn't come in this with a ranking, but the funny part about it was, without it being spoken. So I was with our friends Vinny and Ted, and without speaking about it, both Vinny and I had a plan that the night was ending in shawarma. So without talking about it, this was already just like, we're in the area, we're finding shawarma before we leave, and that was literally how the night ended. We both got shawarma, called an Uber, see you later. That was the end of the night, and it was an unspoken truth of going to get some elite late night food. Catch 22, you got to pay for on the back end. But you know what? I don't do this. This is 33-year-old Will. Very rare that I'm in that area doing late night food like that super often. So when you're there, I think sometimes the consequences are just kind of worth it. So you got to pull the plug. So I'm very happy with it. So that's my vibe check, is checking in with some late night shawarma. Folks, if you out there having a few nightcaps, if it's available, highly, highly recommend suiting yourself up with some shawarma. All right, but that's going to do it for this episode of Green with Envy. Appreciate y'all tuning in. As always, you can find us at Green Envy Pod, Twitter, Instagram. We're streaming a lot more of this on YouTube. We are building up our YouTube panel and our TikTok. Is our TikTok handle also at Green Envy Pod? I know you and Mark have kind of been running that. So we'll clarify that for you next time here. But make sure that you're also following us on YouTube, as we are live streaming a lot of our recordings now. And if you guys want to tune in, you guys want to be a part of the podcast, number one, our DMs are always open. You guys can always email us, celticsnoise@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. Something you guys want us to talk about, let us know. We'll talk about it. But if you want to start joining us for some of these recordings, it's live. If you want to leave a comment, go to YouTube, drop a comment in there for us. We'll shout you out. We'll mix it up. We'll make sure you get addressed. So we'd love to hear the feedback. We appreciate everybody for supporting, as always. And with that, Greg, any final thoughts? And then let us know what we're going to hear on the way out.
We are recording this before the Celtics-Knicks game, so I'm going to have a quick prediction for you. I think the Celtics win the game tonight. I think Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum go for a combined 70 points tonight. I'm going to predict a 70-point Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown combination score right there. Thoughts on that?
I'm just very excited to whatever happens tonight, because we're recording this before. When I listen to the beginning of this podcast, to hear you address how either spot on or how way off you are, I'm very excited to hear that now.
I think the Knicks need to come back down to earth, and I think the Celtics will help them make that fall. So with that, we are going to play some music from my band down here in Austin, Texas. We are called Black Sheep Optimist, and this one is called Skywalking. Peace, everybody.
Peace.